Hello, everybody. You will see a holding slide in front of you, welcoming you to Omni-Channel Futures 2021, here from the Retail Bulletin, a further event as part of our virtual series of events that have been running throughout the pandemic. We will be starting in about 30 seconds time, so hopefully you're comfortable with a hot drink, maybe some lunch, and ready to meet our great panel today. Hello, we have a real camera. We are live to the nation. Hello, everybody. Welcome again. I'm Darren Williams. I'm the founder of Williams Harding Consulting and the exec chair of Scrubbed, a men's skincare brand. And for my sins, I do some of this stuff, presenting webinars, and I do a lot of work with the Retail Bulletin. So thank you, Retail Bulletin team, for hiring me again. Always my pleasure to run these events, but even more so my pleasure to work with such a brilliant panel, and I'll be asking them to introduce themselves very shortly. Please do use the Q&A function of this webinar. If you're on another device that's not a desktop, you'll find Q&A at the top of the screen. If you're on a desktop, I think Q&A is at the bottom of the screen, but use the button. I'll keep an eye on it throughout today's webinar, and we aim to answer all of the questions that the audience put to us. If you were on the earlier fireside chat or webinar number 1, welcome back, and thanks for the questions that you put to our panel earlier as well. And we're looking forward to some real great interaction today. Our aim is to keep you interested for the next 45 minutes. So please do get involved where you can and tell us how you're feeling about the session, or pick on a panelist if you want to ask one of them a real specific question as well. So without further ado, we'll get on and meet our panelists. I just warn you, I have a four-legged friend running around the place at the moment. She's currently working on a chew, so hopefully she'll be nice and quiet, but she is known for some uninvited moments, and we'll roll with it if she does that. So, but yeah, children, uninvited, four-legged friends, all welcome here. This is the real world we're living on in this virtual Zoom life that we live. So we don't have to be perfect, we just have to be real. So without further ado, I'm going to say hello to the panel. I'm going to go in order of the program that we published. So Trevor, I'm going to ask you, first of all, introduce yourself and tell us who you are. Hi.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks for the invite to the team. Yeah, I'm Trevor Gordon. I'm the former Global Director of Omni-Channel Retail at Sodexo, finished really recently, and now working as an independent consultant advising on Omni-Channel and all things transformation in that space. So thanks for the invite and look forward to the chat today.
Thank you, sir. And welcome. I think we've worked together before, haven't we?
We have. I think, yeah, it's, I think 1 or 2 years ago. So I always enjoy the sessions.
Many years ago, indeed.
Although I've got to say, I've never seen the dog, so I'm going to have to watch the video from earlier today to get the side of your dog.
Okay, well, she'll no doubt make an appearance. You've done it now. You've jinxed it. Thank you. Good to work with you again. Chris, hello. Tell us about you.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me. The accent's from New Zealand. I am the CTO of Stitched. I've been working in digital and tech for the last 10 years. Stitched is a D2C curtain and blind retailer. We use like 3D and visualization and all the fun tools we have now to basically make a really complex made-to-measure process possible on digital. So, yeah.
Welcome, Chris. Great to have you here, and looking forward to hearing from you today as well. Anouk, tell us about you.
Hi, Darren. Hello, panel. Lovely to be here. So my name is Anouk, originally from the Netherlands. I work in the UK as the head of digital and marketing for AAMP Global Europe. What we do is we design, engineer all the premium electronics that basically integrate in your vehicle, passenger and commercial vehicles. So whether you're looking for a safer, simpler, or just more enjoyable drive, that's what we do on road or off. Leading the European efforts to lead our D2C channels and also all our B2B marketing for our portfolio of brands.
Thank you. You're very welcome here today. So thank you so much for joining the panel as well. Ian, last but not least, tell us who you are before we kick off.
Hi, good afternoon, Darren, and thanks to TRB for the invite, and welcome to the other panelists. Looking forward to having a bit of a spar with you guys this afternoon, and everybody else on the call as well. Ian Scarr, head of UK for Klevu. Klevu is an online search, merchandising, personalised recommendations product suite that allows you to personalise the shopper experience right from the very first click. I've been in e-tailing and retailing and e-commerce for about 18 years, all the way from email to websites, now to search and personalisation. I also am a bit of a festival promoter on the side, and I'm a committee member of a championship rugby club. So I try and keep myself busy and out of trouble.
Good. Is that true or not? The feel that the need to say you want to stay out of trouble indicates trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So, but
Good.
why not
Keeps
bring
life
attention to
interesting,
yourself?
at least. Exactly. Right, welcome, guys. We're going to kick off. So we're going to go around some questions. I think we'll follow the same order that we introduced ourselves in. We'll kick off with some questions for each of you, and then we'll see what rolls in from our audience. I'm sure you seem like quite a chatty bunch, so 45 minutes is going to roll past in no time at all. Trevor, are you ready, sir?
I am. I was going to say, Darren, I think we're hitting the beard quota with 4 beards, and then the diversity with a Canadian, a Kiwi, and a Dutch. So I think we're off to a good start.
Excellent. Good spot. Trevor, what changes have you had to make in regard to CX and I guess personalization as a result of the pandemic?
No, absolutely. And it's very interesting. I think we've got a really good panel with, across diverse businesses, and all of us will have seen changes. We've heard some of the numbers that, I was reading a study yesterday. We've seen 10 years of e-commerce growth in 3 months. We've seen 150 million people have shopped online for the first time in 2020. So we know the impact and the acceleration of digital. We know the change in the consumer behavior, the way that people are, how they buy, what they buy, and when they buy it. And that's affected all of us. And if we look at the use of data or tech and how we've actually had to shift and adapt our customer experience is massive. It's interesting, we've got different business models. We are a omni-channel retailer. We have 25,000 sites worldwide. And for us, it's about having that connection with the customer. So whether you're talking about in stores or digitally, it's about using that data both for personalization, but also to anticipate their needs in advance and find the best way to deliver those products and experiences they're looking for. And probably what's fair to say is that, our strategy around our customer experience and the whole thing around personalization and the way that we were using data was there, but it's how we flexed it. Just a couple examples to call out. So at the start of the pandemic, one of the key business areas we were doing is, we were supporting frontline workers. So this could be health, this could be manufacturing. And what we were seeing was, we were having to change business lines where we were having to, move a lot to delivery. It was beyond our normal food offering. It was the kind of groceries on the go and all of that stuff. And at the same time, we had thousands of displaced workers. And what we saw was a channel shift of all of a sudden these increased queries and anything else. So we were using AI and the data a lot in terms of the omni-channel orchestration of all of those actually inbound queries. And the other areas we were really using it was that increased focus and use of social media. And that was both in terms of the shift in the content and messaging. So a lot around the data around there in terms of actually the content recommendations and everything else. And probably as well, it's like all the partners here. We had an increasing need and are improving our relationships with our marketplaces. So we were always building the right relationships and everything else. But the way that we use data and as much of you can control that element of experience, that was a real big focus for us as well. But it really accelerated our use of it. And to be honest, the business at Sodexo will carry on that way, and where we are now, it's kind of here to stay. Hopefully that answers it. I don't know if the panel got anything to add or build on that.
I think it answers the question. Brilliant to start with. I mean, the webinar, this session is called The Importance of Leveraging Data, and I think you've just encapsulated some of that in your answer as well, because I think some retailers don't do it well, or they have so much data they just don't know what to do with it as well, and that in itself is a problem. But no doubt we'll debate it more. I think some questions are already coming in, so we'll get around to some more of those later. Chris.
Hey.
Data.
Data.
Is data your ally? And, you know, are behavioral analytics imperative to future success?
Yeah, I mean, we're a digital company, so behavioral analytics is a key part of our kind of just the way we work. Like, we need to see what people are doing, and particularly on site, because otherwise you're only looking at sales data and stuff like that, and you can infer actually quite a bit from that, but obviously not enough. It's been interesting to see. Ironically, because we're a startup, at the start of the pandemic, we were still a startup, but we're a lot smaller than we are now. And I guess it's been interesting because we've had a lot of new customers, so we haven't been able to see like emergent behaviors or anything like that across like. It's all just been new to us because the pandemic kind of thrust us into this position where suddenly all of our competitors, every curtain and blind workshop in the country had shut down, including ours, or the one we were working with at the time. And we decided to split off to use local manufacturers, so kind of local curtain makers. And now we've got this supply chain of local makers, and that allowed us to fulfill orders through March, April, May, and also, which basically, plus just the fact that we're really one of the only online made to measure curtain and blind companies in the sort of mid to high end market. We just suddenly had all these customers that we didn't have before. So it was very important to kind of see what they were doing and use that to validate the work we've done already and to kind of tweak our roadmap and work out what we're doing next. And, behavioral data is very valuable.
Thanks, Chris. The reason I was going on and off mute is because my dog has decided to pick a squeaky toy for a particular play session. So in case you heard any of the background noise, apologies as well. But thank you, Chris, for your answer. And we'll learn more about Stitch as we go through the panel. Anouk, data and the whole subject of data can be quite intimidating. And I think some businesses struggle to get their arms around it because they don't fully understand it. And I think some of that is also around terminology as well. And I'm going to pick two words: attribution and incrementality. What's the difference?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, attribution, we use a lot in our industry, right? We use it in all sorts of ways. And it can mean various things to various businesses. But the way I think you should see it is as the simple way of applying the appropriate credit, I would say, to any of your touch points that led to a specific conversion, right? And that you can do through many, many ways. Could be first touch, depending on channel, could be last click, you name it. There's tons of ways to go for attribution. Mind the cat. Incrementality basically solves can we call it the conundrum of attribution, where we're like, oh, what to assign to where and how well am I doing my attribution? Which means that if you put in incrementality into the mix, you can basically, do that in certain ways so you can actually measure how to attribute to individual channels. So for me, that means that I divvy up my audiences into multiple segments, and I would create a test and a control group, so to speak, very old-fashioned, beautiful way of doing marketing. And I would measure the difference in conversion rates between the two cohorts, just to give an accurate read of any marginal incremental contribution of individual media channels. And that's one thing that we need to think about with attribution, that we don't forget into incrementality, because how valuable is it if you don't know exactly what the difference would be if you wouldn't have one specific activity running, right? Now, for me, that's needed, especially when we try and measure performance for channels that aren't that easy to measure, think social media, but also TV, offline, direct mail. These things are still happening today, especially in my industry. Automotive still very, very big. So there are certain things you cannot really measure with traditional attribution models. So through incrementality, you're instead of just measuring clicks, you're basically measuring the accounts of impressions and clicks within each individual platform. And via your test, you can give an accurate view of the true contribution of a media channel across your entire portfolio. Yeah.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I mean, and I think hopefully our audience found that useful as well, because I think unpacking those and what they really mean is, as I said before in my pretext, intimidating. And I think sometimes you just don't know how to then best move forward because you don't really understand it. So thank you.
I've got to say, Darren, that was the best explanation of attribution in English that I have heard in a long, long time. That was really good.
Agreed. Hear, hear, Trevor. Hear, hear. Ian, let's come to you, sir. So how can e-commerce data be used in tandem with other strategies?
So, and I think everybody on the panel so far has touched on getting the right sort of data, or how difficult it is to identify where that data is coming from, analyzing that data and then using it effectively. And certainly with the questions coming through from the attendees as well, is how then do you segment and then target customers or prospects or people that are buying on your on your sites, for example. So I think e-commerce data is sometimes the richest and easiest and quickest and most reactive data that you can get at any time, because people are telling you pretty much in real time what they're doing, what they're buying, how they are interacting, where they're going on your site, how long they're spending on pages, etc., etc. And I think using that data to target those customers via the segmentation, maybe you've done with your behavior analytics on the back end, is really, really important. But then thinking about how you can automate things in the future to make that targeting really simple as well and effective. So real world example for you. So this is my Holly Willoughby example for you. So one of our customers, Grensons, it's not salacious, unfortunately. I wish it was a little bit more, it is a very interesting story. So our customer Grenson shoes, they sell some fantastic high-end shoes. They've been using Klevu for a number of years. And they started seeing the search term Holly being typed into their search box on the website. And they were going, what is this? And the reason it was happening was because Holly Willoughby was actually on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Let me say that properly. And she was wearing a pair of Grenson's Nanette boots. But people didn't know that they were called Nanette boots. They just saw that Holly Willoughby was wearing them, and it had been mentioned that they were from Grenson's as part of her I think it was an Instagram post that accompanied it. So people were going onto the Grenson site and typing in Holly. They very, very quickly stitched all this together, from understanding what was going on social media to what was going on their site. And they put some very, very quick synonyms and redirects into the back end of the platform. This is not automated. This is a manual understanding of the data, and I suppose the channels which is coming into and what people are doing. And they managed to then redirect people very, very quickly to those Nanette boots on their website and to product landing pages, to product detail pages. The conversions of those boots then went through the roof, because obviously people can now find what they were looking for. And that's one of the mantras of search. You know, it's that intent to buy. People coming on your site, they generally have an idea of what they want to buy. So it's very, very rich and actionable data. So if you go onto Grenson's now and you type in Holly, you'll see all the search suggestions, and all the product suggestions actually in the search overlay will be Nanette boots. So it's a very, very successful use of inbound data to then drive a content strategy on your site by capturing that in almost in real time and being very, really active with it. But that data, again, can then also start to drive some of your models that maybe you glean from your attribution, and you say, right, I'm going to start targeting some of the different channels that I want to go out and attract people to my site. So you can start to use it in SEO, maybe your paid keyword strategies, looking at the trending products that are coming through on your site and things like that. So that information in the analytics that sits on the back end, again, it's going to Chris's view, which is that behavioral analytics. You can then start to use that very, very quickly from a targeting perspective.
Thanks, Ian. So the power of celebrity, social, and leveraging data quickly.
Oh, exactly. Speed is key, because it's all pounds, dollars, euros, and if you don't react to it quickly. The flip side of that is automation, and you can automate a lot of this as well, and that's what great AI and machine learning does on the back end as well.
Thank you, panel. That's our good opening question round. Thank you very much indeed. We've got our first question in, as I mentioned before. I'm going to start with you, Trevor. So take this first question in. So this is from TRB Guest. So whoever you are, thank you very much indeed. They're saying they wholeheartedly agree that data is imperative to making strategic decisions in the industry, but how difficult is it to operationally govern the data and make sure it remains of high quality? How's that for a question?
That's a nice, easy one. No, I'll build on what Ian and Anouk were talking around, because I think it's a really good question, actually, and it's taking a pragmatic approach to it. I'll give an example about this, and I'll bring it back to the pandemic. If you look at, for example, everywhere is builds on data governance, but again, a lot of things have shifted as a pandemic. I'll give you an example. If we look at, say, our use of our data, particularly around KPIs and measurement, we've actually really simplified a lot of what we've done. So we had our data governance around all that stuff there, on which we would make decisions on. And a lot of that was a data-driven approach, assessing key information on your BI and all the KPIs that were coming up. But then, as we saw that, it's always, as the panels pointed out, you need to make decisions and react quickly, but even more so during the pandemic. What we actually tried to do was, in terms of looking at simplifying this, was balancing, to Ian's point, the fully automated, the aspect around the 100% data-driven approach to a bit more what I would call the ears to the ground approach, listening to both our customers and our employees. We were launching some concepts and some propositions, but when the pandemic first came out, the data was unclear as to, is it working or not? And what we saw was, actually, it's that ears to the ground insights. It's that qualitative from your customers. Actually, this isn't really that good, and this is why it's working, and also from your employees as well. So it was that balance around it, and I think it's very easy to, there's also the point that the question makes around the quality of the data. Data is never going to be 100%, but I think if you've got a flexible, nimble governance, the ability to adapt and take a pragmatic view, that goes a long, long way. So we've really actually taken a view of actually simplifying this, whereas before we were measuring hundreds and hundreds of KPIs. It's, what are those top 10 things we need to look at? I'm sure the panel's got another view on it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I thought it was a very full answer, and hopefully the person that asked that question has been helped by that. If you didn't find it helpful, or you still want more information on the back of it, use the Q&A function, and we'll get further answers for you. But no, a very full answer, Trevor. Thank you. Chris, traffic data. How do you really draw down valuable insight about your shoppers' chosen journeys? What do you do at Stitched?
We use kind of. We don't go super deep into a lot of our traffic data because of we're a little bit hamstrung by the way that our site works at the moment in terms of getting clear journeys, because they spend most of their time in a customizer. And you can build pathways through that, but we've kind of tied ourselves in knots a little bit with the way that works. So we've got a whole bunch of new UX coming out that'll make it behave a bit more like a kind of traditional e-commerce site in terms of URLs, and be a bit easier to track the kind of stuff you'd track at, like an ASOS or something. Like, if you've got SKUs, it's a lot easier than kind of what we're dealing with. But that being said, I guess we use Google Analytics a little bit, but one problem obviously is ad blockers and all of that. So we're in the process of building our own little kind of back-end pipeline to get all of our traffic data into our data warehouse, so we can kind of analyze it in a bit more detail, because we've sort of found that between Google Analytics and Heap, they're both like equally imperfect, and I'm sure the reports that we build will be equally imperfect as well. But it's just that kind of, they're not fully giving us the information that we need, and then being able to tie it all into our attribution and stuff is a bit difficult at the moment.
Thank you, Chris. And by the way, Trevor, your questioner, sorry, came back saying they found your answer very helpful. So there you go. Top marks, sir. Top marks. Anouk, back to this kind of unpacking the language thing I made a reference to earlier. So one of those things, again, I think retailers or businesses find hard to understand how to measure are performance on impressions or performance on clicks, and really then unpacking the difference between the two. So what would be your advice or your insight there?
It's a good question. Clicks is probably the most obvious step of what you need to measure in online advertising. That's because it represents an actual interested visitor who's like deliberately taken an action. But also most of the pricing structures we deal with are PPC, like pay-per-click. So it makes sense to do that first. Don't forget about impressions though, because obviously you're not going to get clicks without first having an impression. So you do want a number of impressions, and you want to measure the ratio to how many views and impressions do you need before you actually get a click. And the lower that amount, the better, right? But you also need to not misunderstand what impressions actually mean. It doesn't mean someone's seen your ad. It just means your ads or whatever you do has just been displayed, right? So see it a little bit as like a large billboard on the side of the road, just to stick to my automotive comfort zone. The ad's on the billboard and it's there, right? So you get the impressions from people driving past, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually reading it, right? The guys who are clicking, they've read it, they've seen it, and they're clicking through. So that's really the difference between the two. So what you want to do to optimize your ads is make sure the impressions you receive are as like easy to transform into clicks as possible, which means your ads being placed in very relevant places because you're getting click-throughs, right? If you're getting tons and tons of impressions but nobody's clicking, that means it's probably not a very relevant placement. So that's how I would see that. I don't know if the panel wants to add.
Anything to add, guys?
Yeah, I think personalization on top of that is really important. I think the point there, Anouk, is that if you understand what they're clicking on, it's getting that right content out there. Because, you know, over the years, you know, when I was back in the email industry and it was the old scattergun approach, you know, people were spamming. It was the transition from direct mail into using behavioral data to target people and bring them to your site as a new channel effectively. And now you look at the email industry, it's hyper personalized, it's marketing automation, it is, and are we over emailing? That is another question in its entirety. But back in the day, you know, we had a great stat we used to talk about that you were interrupted in your day, probably a little bit less now because we're all online behind these screens. But if you're out and about on your commute to work, you're interrupted by ads probably 5,000 to 8,000 times a day. So how do advertisers know which ones are going to be the most relevant to you? And therefore, which ones are you going to react to? Because subliminally, you're taking in all this information, and then you're reacting to something that maybe then pops up on your PC, or if they're smarter nowadays, you can use your location data on your mobile phones and all that sort of stuff. And you're starting to get this information to the people that are placing those ads. So I think it's really, really important that, you know, whatever you capture is used in the right way to actually then make sure you're bringing the relevant people to your site. Otherwise, they're going to bounce off. And bounces is just as important as obviously the amount of impressions that are coming through from a conversion perspective.
And I think there, Ian, like behavioral data comes in again, very much so, especially things from Facebook and, you know, related audiences, interest data. What do people actually want to be targeted with is very important. And we do, even the smallest web shops will be collecting that data in their analytics. You don't need a whole set of fancy tools to get that data set. So just knowing that, okay, it's probably not very relevant if I put my ads out in a generic way on this, but hey, guess what? It's actually, I don't know, a specific seasonal day, Father's Day. So let's do a seasonal message. Let's make sure it's slightly more targeted. If you don't know too much about your customer, like you can just go on general market data to start collecting data. And then, of course, you can create a beautiful picture of where your ads should be and optimize your spend accordingly. So you know what clicks to pay for.
I was just going to say, I was really enjoying that discussion between Ian and Anouk, and the thread between it is exactly to what they said. How's it actually going to improve and enrich that customer experience? It's spot on. So I think their answers were really good, and it's always remembering how is this going to improve that experience and engagement with your customer. No, spot on.
Thanks, guys. Ian, actually, someone has directed a question at you, and I'm going to read it verbatim, and hopefully you'll understand what's being asked. So what do you say about data point and the market move day to day?
for me, data, if I'm trying to understand the question correctly, data can change and will change on a daily basis and will change on a user by user basis. So you have to use that data to target and understand the behavior of why that data is coming. So is it coming from a channel, etc. But particularly in our examples on e-commerce websites, data is used, and we collect data from the very, very first keystroke as soon as you're interacting with an e-commerce website. And that first keystroke is starting to personalize the content experience that you are having as you move around that particular site, whether it's a search result, whether it's a search result landing page, whether it be a category page that can be merchandised based upon the automation or through a customer strategy that you put together through the analytics that you have. But then also recommendations as well alongside that on the product detail pages and all the way through to the click in the purchase baskets. We are using literally that first keystroke and I suppose the data point that gives us about you as an individual. So Trevor, Chris, Anouk, Darren, you all have an individual journey mapped out for you on a particular site by what you are telling that site. So data and data points and is so important nowadays as you're interacting.
There's
literally,
definitely,
as you finished your answer, that person has said thank you for that answer, Ian, as well. So there you go. Any more to add to Ian's points there?
I think there's definitely something to be said though for leaning too much on all that automation and personalization, because machine learning is normally more bad than it is good. And I don't mean that qualitatively. I mean that like a lot of models are quite bad because they're trained in a rush. The data used to train them isn't very good. And I think there's a lot of it's quite easy to get seduced by it and to think that what it's doing is good, but you have to be, the best companies that use machine learning tend to be companies that are technically brilliant anyway, because it's technically really hard to do because you have to keep measuring. So personally, we try and steer clear of all of that because there's a lot you can do before you get to machine learning. But yeah, it's definitely quite easy to be seduced by personalization and end up trapping people in this kind of hell of things that they don't even want because your algorithms have inferred the wrong thing because they were trained wrong sometimes 6 months ago. And yeah, it can lead to strange places. You always have to be testing things and making sure the results are what you expect.
Yeah, I think that's a huge
don't disagree.
issue.
Yeah,
I don't receiving stuff you don't want is a big thing.
Yeah, and I think that's very important for everybody to remember that data from a starting point helps you to get your basics right. Before you start automating, before you start personalizing, you don't want to get that feedback back from your customers like great email marketing, but where's the customer service when I order something? You need to first use your data to make sure you don't have a whole bunch of landing pages with very high bounce rates that don't convert. Use your data to know your website isn't too slow and you're therefore losing customers. Make sure your checkout works. Do you have the right delivery methods, or are there complaints and reviews you need to look at? Reviews are also data, right? Don't forget them. There's so much you should do first before you go into personalization. There's a step before personalization, which is customization, just making sure you have, instead of just a central email, target them up a bit, divvy them up a bit. As soon as you get more than a couple of thousand, start segmenting them down and start learning from your individual groups of customers and see if you can create buyer personas. Like, see if you can find 4 customer types of people that buy from you. For Christmas, will be the person that just loves personalizing their own kit that stitch, But there are people who do like machine learning, like they just want everything done for them. So that could be a buyer persona. The guys looking for easy checkout. You'll have return customers buying the same thing over and over. So it could be a product related buyer persona, and the data will tell you that. So basics first, and then all the fancy stuff.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important that you get the best blend of both. And I think when we talk to organizations, large organizations generally will have the people to analyze that data. Smaller merchants, for example, which are probably just started up over the last 18 months and probably saw a huge increase in traffic and the need to get personal over the last 12 months, certainly, as people are pivoted to go online and there was new essentials and all the phrases we've seen. They need that automation initially to allow them to be effective. The second layer for them is then understanding what all that data means to them. and then they get better. So for them to kick on this year, it's about using the analytical data that sits on the back end of that original automation for them. So to answer your question, Chris, I don't disagree. You've got to get the right balance, I think, between everything on that.
I was another question come in actually, and Trevor, I'm going to put it to you just as you're about to speak. I'm going to jump you on this one. So this is from TRB guest again. No, everyone's feeling shy today, not wanting to give their names, but thank you, TRB guest. They're saying perhaps data is of good quality already, but it exists in such a siloed way across an organization that it just needs a good strategy to centralize it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. That's a start. And I was actually just going to build on some points that the rest of the panel was making. And I'll bring it back to that. 2 points. Chris made a real, so Anouk talked about personalization, as did Ian, which is if you start to experiment in there, make it relevant and make it worthwhile. No one wants that creepy or evasive side of personalization where it serves no relevance and it puts the consumer off. Chris raised the point of machine learning. There's nothing worse. We're veering slightly away from personalization, but in terms of machine learning, there's nothing worse than dumb chatbots. And if you think of now that customers are voting with their feet, if they have a bad interaction with your brand or any interaction, physical or digital, with your store, they will leave and they won't come back. We're seeing a massive shift in loyalty. So the point I would keep on, as someone said, yeah, it's useful to have all of your data in one place, but that shouldn't stop you from actually progressing in this. And my advice in all of this would start simple. If you're looking at something like a chatbot, try it on your internet first, try it with your employees, because it takes time to actually learn how to use that machine learning in terms of doing that. So before you turn it on your customers, try it internally first. If you're looking at personalization, as the team said here, start and keep it simple. So in effect, you don't need to invest hundreds of thousands in tech to be able to do this, nor do you need a massive data center somewhere else to do this. You can lift and shift your data to do this, and you can start very simply and easily. That would be my guidance there. And as the team said here, keep it simple. Anouk said test and learn, start there and build on that. I don't know if the panel's got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, Trevor. I think, like how you're saying it, and also for companies that are a little bit bigger to have a few people in staff to trial things internally, it won't just help you get your data set right and get some of the bugs out in the beginning, the obvious stuff that you may miss if it's just your pair of eyes. It will also get you internal buy-in for the rest of your company being on board. And that's something we shouldn't forget about when we do exciting personalization, lovely marketing stuff. If it doesn't translate to the bottom line, again, you get that incrementality and attribution issue where it's like, okay, but I spent X, what did I actually get back? So don't neglect your control groups. You always want to you can do personalized emails, you can do that beautifully and spend X, but have a bunch of people you're not sending that personalized email to and keep them as the old set, right? Just do 50-50 split or something like that. And then of course you can easily prove to your managers, to the rest of the team and everybody else, like, yeah, but these ones had an open rate of 12% and these ones had an open rate of 30, and you can just immediately show the data work for you, make yourself look good in your job as well. Indeed.
I think there's definitely a lot, like coming from a more product background than I guess you guys are all marketers, and sitting in that kind of middle bit. A lot of personalization can be used as a crutch for bad product, like especially if you're talking about the website itself. But even UX journeys, marketing journeys, whatever. A lot of this stuff can be rolled out when things aren't working. But actually, if you just examine the fundamentals and what the actual, like if it's a website, the information hierarchy or something like that, you might actually find the problem that you're solving rather than throwing more complicated stuff at it.
Ian, I'm going to ask you, what would be the one thing that you would tell retailers to do to begin personalizing their website?
Understand what you want to measure initially, and use that to then make sure that you're being relevant to anybody. Because if you're doing that, then you're in with a fighting chance. Putting my search head back on with regards to what we do, searchers give you their intent. They generally know what they're searching for. So you've got to find that balance, I suppose, if you're doing it more on a manual basis and you're using lots of segments and data to understand ultimately what do I want to measure. Is it a click-through? Is it an impression? Is it a sale? Is it a purchase? Yeah, because all of those are drivers for you, because all businesses are not skinned in the same way. You measure success in different ways. Relevancy for me is massively key, but also being able to understand what the buyer is telling you or the visitor is telling you on the site.
Thank you, sir. Unbelievably, we've got 5 minutes left. It always astonishes me how fast these webinars zoom by. So we're coming towards the closing 5 minutes. I'm going to ask all of you to close with the same question, actually, and this is to share what you see as being a key trend in 2021, this slightly still unknown year that we're only 2 months into, or 1.5 months into. So I'm going to start with you, Trevor, to close off your contribution to the panel today. What do you see as being the key trend this year?
Very simply, I hate the term phygital. Phygital is not a term I like.
Yeah.
It's actually omni-channel. It's becoming more and more relevant, and this topic, which is, it's that focus on that omni-channel, and we see some companies doing some great things on personalized experiences, both online and in store. And we saw a lot of great companies over 2020 and continue in 2021 is, how do you actually replicate that in-store experience online? Because you cannot beat that physical bricks and mortar experience and the value of an interaction of a great salesperson on the shop floor. And it's actually how they've been bringing some of those concepts online to actually do that. And I think we're going to see that grow and expand. And the technology is there, but the way it's being used is just dynamite. And it's just really improving and enhancing the customer experience. So that's what I see as the big continuing trend.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that phygital word either. I think phraseology in general just gets bandied around.
Oh, I hate that term.
Actually, customers just want to access you, and they don't really think about, they're quite channel agnostic customers. They just want to access you in the way they want to access you. So you sort of said phygital to anyone, sort of Joe Public walking down the street, they wouldn't know what you're talking about anyway. So Trevor, good to see you, sir, and thank you for your contribution to the panel today as well. And always a pleasure. See you in person sometime. Chris, what would you see as being a key trend for this year?
Experience, I think. Customer, user. I think everything, like across everything, like we're all sick of being at home. So I think there's probably going to be a renaissance of some form in physical. Probably won't bring back Top Man, but yeah, I think like we're all sick of being at home, but I also think like there are some things now that we will just keep doing online because it's easier. Like there's some of the stuff right now, that we're doing online that is exceptionally annoying, and we'll probably be quite relieved to be able to go try on a pair of shoes, for example. But I think for stuff like what we do, actually we offer a better experience in most cases than going into a department, driving all the way to a department store and then having to then come home and get everything. We'll post you the samples. You can use our AR app to see things. So I think like from my perspective, it's all about like we already have really good customer service. It's one thing like that we push quite hard at Stitched, but I think merging all of that kind of human stuff with the fancy AR-y stuff and just like really focusing on the overall experience will be the big one.
Yeah, it was interesting in the last webinar, actually, we talked about, because shops were in trouble before the pandemic, right? And if anything, the pandemic has kind of reminded us about all the things that we've lost. And I think some people are just really looking forward to going out and being in physical stores again as well. Chris, thank you for giving us your time today on the panel. It's been really lovely to work with you. Anouk, key trend for this year. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah. So I had some little bit of time to think about it. Thank you, Trevor and Chris. I think what I found really, really cool, and it actually started end of last year, is, and it may sound very, very, very far-fetched, but it's actually not, is shoppable TV. Don't know if you've heard of this trend, but imagine just watching Netflix and seeing someone wearing a really good shirt. You're like, ooh, I want that shirt. And then just clicking it and actually being able to buy it right there from your sofa with the help of a mobile app. Now, NBC in the US actually rolled this out in December. in the US, and so it's starting on their series now, and it's coming to the UK this year. So with the introduction of more and more clever smart TVs and smart home devices linking to those smart TVs and all of our mobile apps becoming quicker and quicker, you'll soon just be able to say, hello, Alexa, what's the shirt I'm currently seeing? And it's like, oh, get it at TM Lewin, here's the price. And you can click the Add Now button. So that's coming.
Top tip, everybody. Thank you so much, Anouk, and thank you for your insights and all you've added to the panel today as well. Ian, you're going to be wrapping this up. What's your view of the key trend in 2021?
Well, everything that everyone said before me, absolutely, 100% agree, and thank you for the little hints, I suppose. But building on what Anouk's just said, I think, you know, the smart stuff, whatever that may be, whatever device that may be, whatever channel that may be, you speak to it, you touch it, you smell it, even potentially in the future. It's all driven by APIs and data, and it comes back to everything that we've been talking about. It's being able to connect that good data, those good data hygiene, all the personalization, the relevancy, the segmentation, all the things we've been talking about in the last year have got to be top notch for you to use it in any of those environments. So they're all coming, but we've got to make sure that they connect to that good data work we've all done in the past. So customers are going to navigate their way around your sites. They're going to go, and your sites could be complex. And you could have complex journeys, but I think keeping it simple and keeping it relevant is really got to be the way forward this year, because people are going to want to buy from you. So why make it difficult?
Thank you, sir. And also a double thank you to you, Ian, not just for your contribution to the panel, but to you and Klevu for being one of the sponsors of today's events on the TRB as well. And thanks to our other sponsors, Linworks and Zip and Aptos and Nuxio. You do make these events come to life. So it's not just a virtue signaling mention, we genuinely appreciate it. So thank you very much. That's it, everybody. Thank you again to our 4 panelists. You made it what it is today. By the way, you held your audience as well. Again, so congratulations. You kept the interest levels going, which is brilliant. Thank you to our audience for staying with us. The next session this afternoon is at 2:30. The importance of a connected journey. Do please join us then if you can. But for now, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Cheers to my panel. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.